A 19-year-old man from New Zealand stood gripping a shovel, his palms slick with sweat, staring down at the huge pile of cash he'd just unearthed. Each breath felt heavy and laboured, the cold night air biting at his lungs. Did he just hit the jackpot? Or was this a death sentence? Could he really get away with stealing a gangster's money?
I want him dead!
Maybe I could escape to some corner of the world and live like a king. But what Ryan didn't know was that the true danger wasn't just in pulling off the theft, it was lurking in every decision he made from now on. And he was about to make some bad decisions.
Probably one of the stupidest things I've ever done in my life.
Hey guys, welcome to Bent Planet, where I tell you true stories of humans in abnormal predicaments. Tales that will twist your mind, and this story is no exception. If you're as addicted to wild true stories as I am, subscribe and hit the notification bell because I have plenty more in store for you. Alright, get comfortable. Are you ready to hear a story? At age 19, Ryan was ready to take on the world. Desperate to live a life less ordinary, he left his home in Auckland, New Zealand for a round-the-world trip in 1997. But little did he know, this journey would land him in a dangerous game of stolen money, criminals, and life on the run. Ryan arrived in the mountainous regions of Montana, USA, full of expectations for adventure. But it wasn't long before the excitement of exploring the backcountry faded, replaced by the harsh reality of being flat broke. Soon enough, he was rationing out the last of his savings and wondering how the hell he would continue travelling.
23 cents for a pack of macaroni and cheese, and I'm like, that's all I can afford. And it was the poorest I'd ever been.
Luckily, an uncle in Salt Lake City, Utah came to the rescue, offering him a place to stay and a job selling high-end jewellery at a luxury boutique. Not exactly the adventure he had planned, but it was a lifeline. So he jumped on the offer, and soon enough, he met her. She was older, gorgeous, and mysterious. A co-worker named Melissa. Long work shifts soon turned into late-night conversations, and their work relationship quickly heated up into wild nights of booze and sex, and they began spending more and more time together. But something was off. She was always buying him clothes, taking him out, and offering to pay for everything. Ryan knew they were both earning peanuts. They were on the same salary. So where was the money coming from? Turns out she had a boyfriend, Daryl. And not just any guy either, an older man with deep ties to the criminal world and the well-known biker organisation Hell's Angels. Daryl was running a massive counterfeit goods smuggling operation, dealing in fake luxury items like designer handbags, watches and electronics. He had a network that stretched from Mexico to Canada, using warehouses to store the goods and distributors to flood the black market across North America. Daryl had perfected his trade over the years, but when the feds finally started closing in on his operation, they couldn't nail him on the counterfeit goods charges, but instead he got slapped with a hefty tax evasion charge. From that point on, the government took more than 75% of every penny he earned legally. So he found a loophole. Using his girlfriend's credit cards to fund his lifestyle of luxury, he would then pay off the cards with cash from his illegal ventures. This meant Melissa got the perks of huge credit card budgets as a payoff, while Daryl, the criminal boyfriend, could launder his money without losing it to taxes.
His car lease is under her name, the house is under her name, all the food payments, all the everything, and it all just gets paid off this credit card debt at the end of the month.
Of course, Daryl had no clue about Melissa's younger boyfriend, Ryan, who was also enjoying the fruits of this scam. The credit card scheme was used for everything from clothes and cars to expensive dinners and nights out. But as their secret relationship grew, so did the danger. Melissa started whispering ideas to Ryan about escaping her life, getting away from Daryl and his criminal ties. She wanted to flee to South America or maybe even New Zealand with Ryan. But there was one major obstacle. They needed money to pull it off. And Melissa had a plan. "He's got a stash of cash buried," she told Ryan one night. "It's got to be millions. It's his backup retirement fund in case he ever needs it. He's never touched it, and it'll be years before he does. If you help me get it, we can disappear and live a life of freedom." Ryan was intrigued by Melissa's Bonnie and Clyde fantasy, but deep down he figured it was all just talk. Still, the prospect of that much money was enough to make him listen. Soon enough, Melissa brought it up again. Daryl was heading out of town that week. It was their chance. If they took only a portion of the money, it wouldn't raise suspicion. She promised Ryan $30,000 just for helping her dig the money up. Ryan found it hard to believe this could be real, but the thrill of adventure and the possibility of that much cash for free had him nodding his head and agreeing to the plan. So the night came. Melissa led Ryan to the backyard of the house she shared with Daryl in the outskirts of Salt Lake City. Inside a small shed, she pointed towards a shovel and told him to dig a specific spot in the dirt floor where she knew the cash was buried.
I don't know how deep it is, maybe it's 1 meter or 2 meters deep, and then put everything back exactly as you find it. I'm going to go inside right now and make sure none of his friends, none of our friends are coming over. People drop in all the time. So she went inside and I was just sitting there.
As she disappeared from view, Ryan's gaze darted around the shed. Was this some kind of sick prank? Here he was, shovel in hand, digging for buried treasure in some random shed. Where were the cameras? He could almost hear the snickering in his head, the imagined laughter of being duped. But at the same time, every squeak in the shed made him jump, made his pulse quicken. He squeezed the shovel handle tighter, his knuckles turning white. This is insane, he thought. But then again, what if... fuck it. He sighed and started to dig. After 20 minutes of sweat-soaked labour, he was about to give up. He figured Melissa had been messing with him. But then, thunk, the shovel hit something hard. Holy shit, this was real. A rush of adrenaline surged through him. It was a large metal box. He quickly unearthed it and pried it open. Inside were garbage bags stuffed with cold, hard cash. $100 US bills neatly stacked. Holy fucking shitballs. She wasn't lying. And then panic set in. Was this a setup? Could he even trust Melissa now? Then from across the yard he heard Melissa's voice echo out. "Anything yet?" Not yet," he called back, his mind racing. And in a split-second decision, Ryan grabbed thick wads of bills and shoved them into his socks, pulling his jeans over them. Whatever happens, at least I've got something, he thought. "All right, I found it." Melissa came rushing into the shed, her eyes wide with excitement. She went straight to work, pulling out a big enough portion of the money that could hopefully still go unnoticed, while Ryan repacked the remaining cash into the box.
I packed it all away, put it back in the bag, covered it up, putting everything in that little room as close to perfect as I could.
And then he buried it again, doing his best to make sure everything looked untouched. They looked at each other, eyes wide with adrenaline. Oh my God, we did it. For the next few days, they burned through the stolen cash like it was cursed. They broke every rule of laying low, blowing money on expensive dinners, booze and cocaine-fueled nights. With Daryl still out of town, one night, high on drugs and their own euphoria, they thought it would be a fun idea to spread the cash all over the bed Melissa and Daryl shared, and in true outlaw fashion, they took pictures of themselves, snorting cocaine off each other's bodies, screwing like rock stars on top of the stolen cash. But when Ryan picked up the developed film from a photo store, the look on the clerk's face slapped him with a hard dose of reality.
Probably one of the stupidest things I've ever done in my life.
They needed to be more careful. Seeds of paranoia began festering in his stomach. So Ryan decided to get the money and the evidence out of the country. He started sending traveller's checks back to his sister and friends in Auckland, New Zealand, telling them that he was making good money and he wanted to save a bunch of it for when he returned home. Traveller's checks are pre-printed, fixed amount documents that act like cash alternatives. He would buy them at a financial outlet and then send them back to Auckland, knowing he could exchange them back to cash again when he was back in Auckland in the future. He also went to a bank in Salt Lake City, renting a long-term safety deposit box to stash his passport and $10,000 in cash. He then gathered all the receipts for the traveller's checks, photocopies of his passport, and any documents tied to the safety deposit box, and stuffed them all into a bag, along with everything he could think of that would tie him to the crime, including all the photos he'd taken with Melissa. His plan was to also send the bag back to his sister in Auckland for safekeeping. But before he could get to the post office, Melissa told Ryan she wanted to visit her parents in Colorado Springs, a short flight away, and invited him to join. Ryan agreed, thinking it would be good to get away from the area for a while, but as they packed, he stressed the need to get to a post office and mail his bag of evidence before they left. Melissa took so long getting ready though that they ran late for the flight, missing their chance to get to the post office. Instead, she convinced Ryan to leave the bag with a friend of hers who lives near the airport. Daryl doesn't even know her, she reassured him. It's safe. Despite feeling uneasy, Ryan had no choice but to agree, and they left for Colorado Springs, dropping the bag off on the way. In Colorado, the two of them felt any nervous tension disappear. Melissa's parents loved Ryan, everyone got along, and they both felt like they were on some sort of honeymoon high. Melissa's parents were also happy to see their daughter with a younger guy who seemed far less shady than Daryl. Melissa's dad was an ex-cop who knew Daryl was mixed up in the criminal world, so seeing her move on to someone new was a relief. But then one morning, as they all relaxed after breakfast, the phone rang. Melissa's dad answered it. Then, looking concerned, he turned and called out to Melissa. "It's for you. It's Daryl." Sometime later, she got off the phone and nervously explained to Ryan, "Shit. He's thinking about digging up the money for a business investment opportunity. I tried to subtly talk him out of it. I think he changed his mind." The next day, the phone rang again. When Melissa answered, Ryan could see her body stiffen, her face draining of colour. His gut twisted as she mouthed the word, "Daryl." The voice on the other end wasn't just angry. It was cold. "Someone's stolen a chunk of my cash," he snarled. "Only you and one other person know about it. I know you wouldn't do it, so it's gotta be him. I'm gonna kill him. He's a fucking dead man." Melissa got off the phone, terrified. Would Daryl figure it out? Within days, they had their answer. Daryl called again. "I hired a private detective. He found the bag. I've seen the photos. I know everything." Then came the final words that sent shivers down her spine. "You're both fucking dead."
So he tracked down, somehow her friends found the bag and found the photos of us fucking on his money with a copy of my passport, like with everything that I just would have like dreamed never to happen, all right there in front of him.
The nightmare had begun. They had no choice but to turn to Melissa's father for advice. He pulled some strings to get information from the underworld and confirmed their worst fear. There was already a price on their heads. Daryl had put out the word, and they were being hunted by both criminals and dirty cops.
I'm so paranoid. Like, we really thought that someone was going to come and just shoot us in the head. Like, the Hells Angels are part of this. Like, the police are looking for us. It's suddenly gone from this situation, her father being an ex-police, really serious guys, like, "You guys have really got to disappear because I can't protect you with this."
There was only one option left. Run. "Don't even tell me where you're going, and don't use your real identification anywhere," Melissa's dad told them as they walked out the door with a couple of small bags, heading to the highway to begin hitchhiking. Hours blurred into days, jumping from cars to trucks, moving from town to town. Weeks crawled by as they moved from motel to motel, paying in crumpled bills, always peering over their shoulders, lying awake through long nights in cheap, musty rooms. Every creak and groan of old walls sounded like a footstep moving towards them. The fear was tangible, wrapping around them like barbed wire. One of the most brutal parts of being on the run wasn't what you would expect though. It wasn't the constant chase scenes you see in a Hollywood thriller. Instead, it was the long, painfully slow hours of boredom, soaked in fear. No high-speed pursuits, no close calls, just endless days and nights of dread. Always wondering when the door would burst open. Relentless boredom while hiding from the world, all with a consistent feeling of fear breathing down the back of their necks. What is happening out there? Has anyone worked out where we are yet? They passed the time however they could, having sex in every way imaginable until even pleasure became less desirable, ordering pizza after pizza, having a Nintendo PlayStation delivered and playing endless video games. But every moment was haunted by the thought that armed men could storm in at any second. Ryan wanted to buy a gun, but he had no idea how. He managed to get his hands on a large Bowie knife though. One day, while they were in the middle of yet another video game, the back door suddenly pounded with someone's fist. Bang, bang, bang. Fuck! The sound was so fierce it sent terror racing through their veins. Ryan bolted out the front door, climbing up latticework and onto the roof. He clutched the Bowie knife between his teeth, thinking, the only way we survive this is if I jump down on the hitman and stab him before he shoots us. As he slowly eased up to the edge and peeked over, his eyes caught sight of the intruder. Relief flooded his veins. It was just a pizza delivery guy. For some reason, he decided to come around the back. Fuck! They were seriously on edge. But despite being one of the most stressful times of their lives, ironically, no one had shown up at the motels. No confrontations had actually taken place. 6 weeks had passed, not knowing if someone would break in to end it all, and it was this agonizing uncertainty that slowly wore them down, and it slowly drove them to take a risk. They decided it was time to go out and have a night of drinking. Nobody had spotted them up until this point, and now they were in a small town in Colorado that they felt relatively safe and hidden in. So they headed out. Finding a nearby bar, they quickly started slamming the drinks down over a game of billiards. As the alcohol kicked in and they finally felt like they could loosen up, they joked around with other regulars and the bar staff, and one of the bar girls behind the bar was being especially attentive to Ryan, and it was becoming pretty obvious she was keen on him. She introduced herself as Fiona and began slipping him drinks for free, while Melissa herself was getting more and more drunk and began flirting with some guy they were playing billiards with. Both Ryan and Melissa were enjoying the attention after so long being stuck with just each other, until eventually Melissa leaned over and quietly said, "Hey, if you want to hook up with this girl, go for it. Have fun. I can hook up with the guy over here and we can both have a little adventure of our own. We deserve it. We can meet back at the motel tomorrow." Despite being a little shocked at the suggestion and her casual ease with the idea, Ryan was also drunk and excited by it. And soon after, he couldn't even see Melissa anywhere, so he focused all his attention on Fiona, who had just finished her shift. They got super drunk together and she invited him back to her house. Despite being completely wasted, she jumped behind the wheel of her car and he got in the passenger seat and they took off. Eager to get home, they raced down the main strip. It was late at night and the road was empty. But it was winter and extreme cold had caused black ice to form across sections of the asphalt. On a relatively gentle bend, Fiona lost control of the car as the wheels slid without warning. The vehicle spun out, skidding to the centre of the road, then hit the median strip and bounced up, slamming into a telegraph pole. They both lurched forward, caught quickly by seatbelts. They groaned, clutching at their chests. At least they were alive. But the car wasn't. It had died on impact. And even if the engine could start again, the vehicle was a complete wreck, bent out of shape and useless. In complete shock, but still drunk, and driven by their newfound infatuation, Fiona told Ryan they were only a short walk from her house anyway. And nobody had seen them crash, so stumbling out onto the road, they walked the 6 blocks or so back to her apartment. Grabbing each other, kissing, making out all along the way, they eventually arrived and rushed straight upstairs to her bedroom, ripping each other's clothes off. Fiona's bed slammed against the wall, shaking the house as they lost themselves in the moment before passing out. The next morning, they both woke up, groaning with hangovers and the stark realization of the accident. Fiona knew she had destroyed her car and would need to have it towed. They painfully made their way into the kitchen and began making some breakfast, when suddenly a man burst through the door and yelled, "You need to move out of this house." Fiona looked shocked. "What? Why? That was so disrespectful. All that noise last night when you know how I feel about you?" Ryan hadn't even realised she shared the apartment with someone, let alone with her landlord, who clearly had a thing for her. "I want your stuff out of this house by the end of the day." The guy warned her and then stormed out. Angry and devastated at how much her life had changed in one night since meeting Ryan, Fiona turned to him and told him to leave. So Ryan made his way back to the motel, hoping Melissa's night had gone smoother. But when he entered the room, it was empty. Not only was she gone, but all her belongings had disappeared. Only a note lay on the bed. I thought I could do this, but it doesn't feel right anymore. I've left. I'm going to travel overseas by myself. Maybe we can meet up again someday. I've left you a small amount of money in case you need it. Ryan stared at the words in his hands, feeling a wave of panic. Had he misread her so badly? Was she testing his loyalty by suggesting they both hook up with other people last night? Did he hurt her that much by going along with it? He ran out the door hoping to catch her, but she was nowhere in sight. He was alone. Limited money, no passport, unable to use his real identity, still on the run, still being hunted by criminals and cops. Alone. 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 His partner in crime had chosen to abandon him. If it had all seemed like fun and games before, running from danger together, bouncing off each other's energy through moments of fear, now reality had hit. He wasn't part of a team anymore. He was truly on his own, a foreigner in a foreign country, with no idea how to navigate his way through this. Most of all, he realised how much he had relied on Melissa. He thought he had his act together as a young criminal, but in truth it had been Melissa who knew how things worked in this country. He sat on the bed with his head in his hands. Fuck! His only option now was to get back to Salt Lake City, grab the stash of money and his passport from the safety deposit box, and flee the country. But how? He had no ID, no credit card to purchase tickets to travel anywhere or hire a car, just a library card he'd managed to create with a new fake name, David Blake. He needed help. And the only person he could think of, the only person he even knew here, was Fiona. When he showed up at Fiona's bar, she didn't want anything to do with him. The moment she saw him, she begged him to leave. Meeting him had turned her life upside down in just 12 hours, and now she despised him. Desperate, Ryan asked her how much it would cost to fix her car. 3 or 4 grand, she responded. I'll pay for it. That got her attention. Finally, she agreed to hear him out. He sat her down and told her everything, every dark detail of his story. Fiona was shocked, but reluctantly, she agreed to help him get back to Salt Lake City if it meant he would give her the money to fix her car. Using her credit card, she bought 2 flights, one in her name, the other under Ryan's fake library identity, David Blake. Thankfully for domestic flights, no passport was needed, and somehow Ryan sweet-talked the airport check-in clerk that his library card was good enough identification. Getting off the plane in Salt Lake City, Ryan was terrified. His heart pounded as he left the airport, convinced someone would be waiting to grab him, but no one appeared. The fake ID had worked. They rented a room in a hotel overlooking the bank where Ryan's safety deposit box was held. For the next day, Ryan obsessively watched the bank from his window, scanning the street for anyone suspicious. He was sure the bank was being watched, that Daryl's goons would be waiting for him. But he needed to get into that deposit box. His passport was his only ticket out of the country, and the 10 grand inside was crucial for his survival. Finally, he decided to go for it. He jammed headphones in his ears, cranked Jamiroquai to try and lift his mood and boost his confidence, pulled his hoodie tighter over his head, and then talking to himself, trying to drown out the panic clawing at his mind. Focus on the music, focus on the beat. But every time he circled the block, the fear gripped him tighter. He could almost feel invisible eyes tracking his every step. By the time he walked towards the bank doors, his heart felt like it would explode, his pulse drowning out the music. It's just a few steps, then it's over. But the fear was too strong. He stalled, ducking into a nearby Japanese restaurant. He ordered a breakfast set, hoping to calm his nerves. His gut was crawling. Cracking an egg on the edge of the bowl, he expected to peel it, but it was raw, spilling all over the table, a disgusting mess. His stomach lurched. He ran to the bathroom, vomiting bile until nothing was left.
I hadn't even eaten anything yet. I just threw up for like 15 minutes. So I was so nervous. Like, that is the pinnacle of I'm gonna get fucking shot in the head any minute now.
He was a complete wreck of nerves, but it was now or never. He walked towards the bank doors and entered. Sweating and paranoid, he approached the manager, relieved to have them respond with a smile and lead him casually into the room full of safety deposit boxes. Frantically opening his, he retrieved everything and headed towards the exit. Vroom! He could feel electricity in the air running waves through his anxious body, but he was out on the street. His heart raced with every step. It felt like 10 times further to walk back to the hotel, convinced each passing car held someone looking out for him. When he finally reached the room, Fiona was waiting. He'd done it. And again, the most brutal part of the mission was the fear itself. The expectation of being killed had been far more present than any real physical threat. They packed up fast and headed to the airport, managing to buy the last seat on a flight to Mexico just before ticket purchases were cut off. Ryan handed Fiona her hard-earned money, said goodbye, and ran to the boarding gate. As the plane took off and the wheels left the ground, Ryan felt the first flood of relief in months. So much tension and anxiety had been crushing him mentally, and all without a single interaction. He'd managed to avoid being caught. He was flying, escaping. But Daryl wasn't done looking for Ryan. He tracked down the movement of his sister Sarah back in Auckland, thanks to the trail of traveller's checks. It didn't take him long to find out that Ryan's sister Sarah managed a bar in one of Auckland's rougher neighbourhoods. One day, while Sarah was working a shift, 2 men wandered into the bar and approached her. They'd been sent by Daryl. Pulling her aside, they told her they knew Ryan had sent traveller's checks to her. As one of the men tightly gripped her arm, he looked her dead in the eye. "You're going to give us in cash the amount you were sent with those checks, or there will be serious consequences." Sarah felt her throat tense up. She'd faced plenty of drunken idiots threatening her in the bar before, but she knew these guys weren't bluffing. They weren't angry drunks. They were calm and cold, their eyes devoid of emotion. These were professionals. She wanted to tell them to piss off home before she called the cops, but she knew these guys wouldn't wake up the next day full of regret. They were sober, and they were deadly serious. Nodding her head quickly, she mumbled nervously, Okay, I get it. But I need to call someone to bring the cash here. Just wait a moment." "Good girl," one of them muttered. Sarah walked back through the pub, but not to the phone. She moved straight to the end of the bar where a large group of men sat joking together over their beers. Sarah had been running the bar for 10 years now. It was a tough pub in a rough area, but she had built a loyal clientele, regulars who were more like family. Among them were members of a local gang who had always kept an eye on her, and they loved her. As soon as she told them there were 2 men threatening her, they jumped into action like soldiers hearing an air raid siren. They surrounded the 2 thugs and forced them back out into the back car park. An argument broke out and Daryl's men tried to stand their ground, but they were overwhelmed. Sarah's boys beat them up until they lay crumpled on the concrete. Then, lifting the lid on a trash dumpster, they hurled both men into it. Despite Sarah's squad of defenders being completely coincidental, a clear message had been given. Ryan's family wasn't to be messed with. And after that, Daryl's crew backed off and Sarah didn't get any more visits. But was Ryan truly in the clear? Someone out there might still be coming for him. Fear became his shadow, stalking his every move. It wasn't the violence itself that tormented him. No, it was the lingering uncertainty, the never-ending suspense of waiting for that violence to happen. He had once yearned for adventure, for a life less ordinary. Now he had it, but ironically, it wasn't by choice. Ryan had escaped death, but he would never escape the waiting. The waiting to find out if Daryl would strike back. He could change his country, his lifestyle, his name, but he could never change one thing: the fear of the unknown. And that fear, it would haunt him for a long, long time. Alright guys, that's it for today's true story of humans in abnormal predicaments. For another wild true story of how insects saved a woman whose parachute failed, click here. And for more crazy true stories, head here. Stay safe out there, and as always, stay bent.